This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Okay, this is take 2 this time. Here's the mark. What a pain in my... So a long while back, I was listening to an interview with Roger Deakins, one of the greatest cinematographers of all time. And he was talking about his transition from film to digital and how he didn't really change much when he started doing that. But one thing that he did say that was interesting to me is that he created a LUT when he first started shooting on the Alexa, and it sounded like he's used that LUT ever since, which got me thinking. I definitely had seen some similarities in color throughout a lot of his digital films. So I thought maybe, in the film industry, DPs actually get a lot of creative control over color versus like the commercial world where usually you pass along the footage and you may not ever get to touch the color or have any influence on that. And so I thought, well, maybe that LUT is getting transferred through. Now I think what he was talking about is that he actually shoots with this LUT on set. So to actually see these colors coming through on the image while he's shooting. Now I've talked about this before with my pocket LUT that I use to shoot with. Rather than using some of the LUTs that are installed on the camera, I just tried to make one that was a little bit more pleasing for me while I'm shooting, so I can look at my lighting ratios and kind of see what the image is going to look like before I even get it into the computer, rather than looking just at a log image. Now I've been experimenting with this over the past couple of years with commercial cinematography, where I'll sort of build a look and a LUT for the client, something that kind of matches their vibe, and try to shoot with that on set. And it works pretty well. So I decided I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into this and try to build a LUT that I shoot with more regularly. And actually what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to reverse engineer Roger Deakins' color profile. I've watched almost all of his digital films and I've looked at them very closely. I think I have a pretty good idea of what the tones are coming out of his Alexa footage. So the first time I ever really noticed his color profile was in Skyfall. I noticed that his skin tones actually look pretty similar to No Country for Old Men. They were a little different though, but I thought there was something going on there, and I knew that he was shooting on the Alexa and not on film. So I went back and started watching a bunch of his films, and you'll just notice that this look is everywhere. It's really easy to spot in Sicario, and especially in Blade Runner 2049. But I'm just going to try to reverse engineer his LUT and try to just shoot some scenes on it to kind of see if I can get that similar look and vibe right out of camera. So I'm going to actually see if you can shoot this way. If you can always shoot with the LUT, expose correctly, and be able to just drop that LUT on in post and basically not have to do any more work. Now, I think this is a really good way to add a consistency to your style and to really help with your lighting ratios on set. Sometimes it's really easy to get caught up in the log profile and knowing that all the information is there and that you can try to fix it in post. But this way you kind of eliminate that from the equation and just know that you do have room in case something goes wrong, but just using that as a way of adjusting in post if you have to and not just because you can. A lot of Deakins' work looks really natural. That's kind of his thing, is trying to make sure that his cinematography doesn't get in the way of the story. So you can see here I'm just using some window light to light me. I'm just trying to get something that's sort of even, has a little bit of shadows in the mix, but nothing too crazy in the highlights, just a kind of basic even exposure. And then I'm using the color chart here just kind of as a reference. If I need to, I can look at the different colors and where they're kind of moving around when I start tweaking this in the computer. And then I lean forward to get more into the sun so I could see a little bit of an exposure shift and how that affects the image. Now I am shooting all this at 5600 Kelvin rather than shooting at like a shade profile like 6000 or 6500 Kelvin on the white balance. But I'm doing that on purpose because I'm trying to build a LUT that's kind of in the middle. So we're going to do 5600, and then we're also going to experiment with using tungsten light, but then shooting the camera at 4000 Kelvin. So if you'll notice, a lot of Roger Deakins' work, when he's using practicals in a room, the skin tones get really, really warm, very red and orange. Now it's something you'll see a lot in movies, but I think that he's leaning into the color temperature here. I think he's trying to create contrast by shooting it somewhere around 4000 or 4500 Kelvin, and then letting the 3200 Kelvin lights become more warm on the skin tones. And I think the skin tones look really, really pleasing when he does this. So that's what this setup will be actually right now. We've got the camera set at 4000 Kelvin, and then I've got this Nanlite Pavo tube. It's a 4-foot RGB tube. I've talked about these in the past. And I have it pointing at the wall, so it's bouncing off, creating a nice big light source on my face right now. And so this is kind of acting like a little lamp in the room. And then I'm blocking it from the background so it doesn't spill too much. And that way we have something to work with once we get this in the computer and try to reverse engineer his color profile. I think the best way to reverse engineer this is definitely going to have a subject. So I'm going to have some skin tones. I'm trying to have some contrast on my face. When I shot over by the window, I tried to expose it as far to the right on the histogram as I could to make sure that we have a lot of room in post to play with. But here I didn't really have that ability, but that's okay because we're going to play with the idea of shooting closer to the bottom end and how the LUT reacts in that environment as well. So in order to do this, I don't have a color chart, but I do have this slate here, and we're just going to use the colors on the slate as kind of a reference to what things are looking like. So you can kind of see the highlights there. You can see when it's straight on, you can see from black, the grays, the whites, the reds, the blues, obviously. And that'll help just give us an idea of how the color is changing a little bit. So I'm also going to shoot this exact same footage at 3200 Kelvin at a pure white balance, so 3200 Kelvin on the Fuji X-T3, just so we can have a reference between the two and how to get the skin tones matching more like what Deakin's skin tones look like in his movies. So now that we have some shots here, let's throw it in DaVinci Resolve and see if we can reverse engineer Roger Deakins' LUT. Okay, so this was a little bit harder than I expected. I'm just an amateur colorist, I'm just a self-taught colorist, and I'm doing this kind of all by eye and just trying to figure it out as I go. After looking at a lot of Deakin's images, I can tell that there's some interesting things happening on the scopes. First off, everything is really compressed into the bottom half of the image, which I've talked about before on this channel, but the trick is to how do I put it all in there and then still have the contrast levels that I want? So I can definitely bring it all down, put the contrast in there, but how is that gonna work when I'm shooting? So that's what I'm gonna kind of test out. I'm just gonna take what I've initially already created, I'm going to put that LUT on my monitor, and I'm just gonna kind of shoot around and see if it looks like something that might be usable on a real shooting scenario. Maybe it'll work. Maybe it'll be something that I can use as a film stock and not just use the log profile or a stock Rec 709 LUT on this camera. All right, so let's give it a shot. Let's see how it works. If it sucks, we're gonna go back to the drawing board and we're gonna try some more stuff out. Okay, so I think this is working pretty well. You can kind of see that some of the shadows got a little too dark when I was just kind of filming around over on the shelf. And that's because I wasn't letting the exposure live in the right spot. And that's kind of the whole point of the LUT. It's to get a nice color profile, but also to keep our contrast the same and our exposure the same. That way we are honest and we're not going to underexpose the image or overexpose the image while we're shooting. Now obviously we're shooting to a log image, so we could bring back any of this stuff in post rather than worrying about it on the monitor, but that's not what we're trying to do here. So I designed this to kind of work indoors and outdoors, so the exposure is living where the shadows are at 20 IRE and the highlights are around 80 IRE. But once we are actually put the LUT on the footage, you'll see that we're trying to emulate Deakin's LUT in his color, and like a lot of movies do, and the highlights are actually going to get brought all the way down to like 60 or 70 IRE, which gives it a really nice cinematic film-like feel. The shadows are going to come down too, obviously, and everything's going to get kind of compressed in the lower end of the histogram, which looks really nice and rich. So I think what I'm going to do now is maybe create one or two scenes from a couple Roger Deakins films using this LUT and try to light that way, and then also see if the color kind of matches his look. And if it doesn't, I think that'll be okay. I think what I've done here is design a pretty fun, nice stylized look, and that I'm gonna probably still use on other stuff regardless if it looks just like Roger Deakins. Okay, let's give it a shot. So how does this look? Does it look like I'm in Blade Runner 2049? Yeah, I told you not to fuss. Okay, but for real, do I look like I'm in Blade Runner 2049? because I'm not ready to retire. What do you think? Does this look bad? Does it look good? Something that's kind of interesting about this shot is that I was able to just kind of tweak the white balance a little bit to change the color temperature to kind of get it to match Blade Runner 2049 more. So what's kind of cool about the LUT is that you can also tweak the colors a little bit just by changing the color temperature to kind of move the color where you want it to be, still all in camera. I was also able to tweak the color temperature on my Nanlite RGB tube right here that I'm using to light myself. I just have it sitting on the counter bouncing off of my blinds at me, and it kind of looks just like window light. So these are all things I can do while I'm shooting to see the look in camera and not have to worry about it later in post. Alright, so I think I did a pretty decent job here. It's definitely a LUT that I can use going forward. It's a look that's similar to Roger Deakins' look. I think that the tones are pretty much the same. You know, there's a little bit of kind of like this green kind of yellow cast in the highlights, and there's gonna be nice red warm skin tones that you can kind of see here right now. And then I can tweak the white balance in camera or change the tint just a little bit just to kind of make the look a little different for me while I'm shooting on the day. Now, it's not always advisable to do that kind of stuff in camera, but I think this is a really fun way of shooting, and it's a much more disciplined way of shooting, and kind of, like I said before, it's kind of like shooting digital film. It's like using it as a film stock and not just a way of just like creating a cool look and then moving on with your color grade in post. But what's cool about this is that you have a foundation to work off of, and you'll have a much more consistent image when you're shooting. If you look at some of Roger Deakins' movies like Prisoners, or maybe even like Skyfall, you can tell that the colorist or him tweaks the image a little bit after the fact, obviously. Like for instance, in Skyfall, you'll notice that the blues pop a little bit more, they're a little bit more saturated. So like if you really look at Daniel Craig's eyes, they're super blue, unnaturally blue, but that's something you can quickly do yourself if you wanted to. You just need to go into the hue saturation, find the blues or the cyans, and then you can just crank that back up, and you can do that to make a new LUT, so you can just shoot like that. So if you want to support the channel and you really like this LUT and you like this look, I'm gonna leave it for purchase on my website for basically just the cost of a beer. It's just a way so you guys can experiment with this look yourself, and just, you know, if you want to get back to the channel, that's great too. It's gonna be on my website under the LUT section, which reminds me, I actually built this website with Squarespace, which is today's sponsor. If you work in video, you definitely need a way to show off your work online, and that's where Squarespace comes in. It's an all-in-one platform to build your website online. You can easily design and update your portfolio with ease. As a video creator, I've always liked Squarespace because they have built-in video embed options from places like Vimeo and YouTube, which keeps things nicely integrated and you don't have to use some proprietary video player. So if you're looking for a way to up your presence online, head to squarespace.com/SpencerSakurai to get started and save 10% off your first purchase of website or domain. So if you're new to the channel, I'm Spencer Sakurai. I've been a cinematographer for around the last 10 years, and I've shot for brands like Adidas, Google, ESPN, KFC. And if you like this kind of content and you like this video, you know, give me a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And until next time, guys, cheers.